In this last video, I just want to give you a few quick takeaways so we can sum up the information that I've covered and again, give you a few things you can think about going forward. Let's jump into it. Here are the main things that I think we can take away from my thoughts here. The first is develop your ability to draw small and plan images. As I said, I think this is a separate skill, and I think it's something that, irrespective of working on, big illustrations or detailed illustrations, it's something you can just practice in your sketchbook. How do you draw rocks? How do you draw trees? How do you draw clouds? How do you draw people? How do you draw tiny little birds? How do you draw all that stuff small, right? This is where you experiment with your just sort of visual library of how to draw small things. I think a really good exercise is to do exactly what I just said. Try and think of, the top 50 things that you have to draw. It could be, again, knights in shining armor. It could be, again, like little birds, big birds, clouds, leaves, trees, foliage, rocks, different types of rocks. How do you represent that and try and communicate that in a small little drawing? The next thing is that I think in addition to that, you should sort of put that into planning thumbnails, right? So spend time creating thumbnails and getting your ideas onto the page. I also think this is really important to do this as soon as possible. Even though the ideation phase where we, think about things before, I think is really good, I really only mean that sort of as we are, preparing to draw an image, right? It has to be sort of, where we're sitting down to create an image, and before that, we're again preparing for it. I think just mindlessly spending time thinking about the images we want to create can actually do more harm than good. You want to kind of make it real as soon as possible and practice the idea of having an idea and then putting it into the real world, right, onto two-dimensional paper as soon as possible. If we don't do this, it's very easy to kind of then just keep imagining that our image is going to be great. And the more time you sit there imagining how good it is, the more disappointed you're going to be when, if you're only doing a little bit of thumbnailing for the first time, you sort of draw it out and it doesn't meet your expectations, right? So the sooner you get it out into the real world, the sooner your expectation of what it's going to be will be realized, and the sooner you can, again, modify that and work on that and develop your ability to, again, develop it, right? And make it better, make it live up to the idea in your head and realize this is a process, right? It's not a matter of like, think of the best thing you can and then, just do one thumbnail, right? It's the process of matching your idea and your internal sort of stuff to this external sort of final thumbnail. It's a process, right? It takes time. And I think it's important to focus on building your own style and way of working. I think in many ways style flows from process, and you will come up with your own process that maybe is not exactly the same as mine or the one that I'm advocating, but again, realize that there are reasons why I'm saying that at least we should have a thumbnail phase so that we can present the thumbnail, and we should have a construction phase where we're able to draw as rough as we want, right? I think those are the key things that I feel like have really made the most difference. And in general, the best thing that I feel like will help your reliability and your relaxation under pressure is to make sure you're overlapping steps. But apart from that, I think it's really important that you look at your favorite artists, how they do things, and you develop your own style that really fits your way of doing things, right? And fits your ideation process. Okay, we're all unique, and the more you can highlight and work towards your specific goals in the specific way that you think, the better you're going to be able to squeeze out sort of good imagery right from that system. The next thing is, I feel like you should just study images you like, figure out what you like about them, and apply that straight away to your thumbnails and plans. So as with a lot of these ideas where, we're doing study or we're looking at inspiration, or perhaps you are actually doing some of those more abstract studies, where you are doing sort of breakdowns, graphic breakdowns of masterworks, right? All of that stuff is useful, but it's most useful when we're continually practicing the act of making the type of imagery that we want. And we do these studies, and then, slowly we fold in the information we glean from those studies and exercises into our continual practice of work. Apply those things straight away to your thumbnails and plans, right? And again, that way you'll be able to practice this idea of translating ideas that you come up with, ideas you see in the world, directly into your ideation process. The next thing is, as I said, create a construction phase in your process so you can explore the form and build your fundamental drawing ability while creating the finished image. This really is the hack. If there is a hack, I feel like this is it. I think you will develop your ability to create really finished images the most when you're doing it. And I think the problem is often the reason our images aren't as good as they could be is because our drawing ability is lacking, right? We're still developing that. And, just in general, I think we can always develop our drawing ability. And I think just having a designated rough phase where you can be as rough as you want, you can explore, you can crack open the anatomy book, you can do whatever you want, right? And you can redo it, you can redraw it, you can erase it 100 times. Having that freedom allows you to use that almost as your sketchbook, right? It's almost like you can explore and play and have a lot of freedom within your process, right? While you're heading towards your goal. I think you're much better off doing that in most cases than sort of doing endless sketchbook pages, right? One thing is kind of training you to do sort of sketchbook stuff, which again can be fun. The other thing, but not necessarily useful. And the other thing again is training you to get a high level polished image. The next thing is, again, create a phase in your process where you assess the hierarchy of detail, define your 1, 2, 3 read, and figure out if you need to add or remove detail to support it. So this is something where, again, have it as a designated point where you just remind yourself to focus on this. This can either be, again, probably something that's sort of later on, but it could also be just where at each stage, you just have a couple of things as a checklist, right? And this is one of them, right? Where's your hierarchy of detail? Where's my 1, 2, 3 read? And just make sure you maintain that at top of mind. And when you come to the end, again, really have a stage. It doesn't necessarily need to be a separate sort of thing, but have a phase where you kind of just go, okay, let's figure this out. Let's make sure, let's bring back the thumbnail. Make sure I'm on track. You know what I mean? And make sure this works. And if you need to adjust things, then, adjust things. If you need to sort of, finesse things, finesse them, right? But, do that consciously. Don't just kind of hope it happens. I think we can also study images you like and notice where they place focus and lead the eye via 1, 2, 3 read. So similar to, just sort of studying images, but I think specifically when you're doing this and you start practicing this, you can actually look at images and really focus on how are they controlling the eye. Often the best images are so good at controlling the eye that we kind of don't notice how they're doing it, right? That's almost by definition when it's it's like magic. When it's done really well, you kind of don't notice it, right? You sort of don't notice that it's there. And, part of this process is consciously bringing that stuff to top of mind and studying it. I think that can be very simple, and I think that can assist you greatly. So find your best images and actually notice how they're doing that, because it is exactly that task that's often so well hidden in really good images. The next thing is collect images that serve as goal images that you're trying to match for style or finish, impact, feeling, essentially whatever you want, but formally kind of collect them. You can do this via an influence map, just as a collection of sort of, in a folder. You can make a Pinterest page, whatever really is most comfortable for you. And again, the next thing is assess your own finished images against them, right? Against those goal images, and note where you can improve. And remember that you can do this visually. We don't have to write essays. We don't have to do any of that because we're in a visual medium, right? And it's important to respect the natural qualities we have as humans in that visual sphere, and respect the fact that you can learn a lot just by looking, as long as we're consciously looking for the right thing. One of the things that I really noticed is, again, I'm not traditionally someone who does a lot of quote unquote painting, but, when I do, and I really am in that sort of flow of thinking about brushstrokes and, soft and hard edges, and my brain is keenly focused on that task. When I stop working and then I go look at other people's painting work, I sort of start noticing the brushstrokes a lot more. In many cases, I've had situations where I've kind of been shocked to the degree to where now I actually notice a whole bunch of stuff that I never noticed, right? So because I'm not 100% focused on that sort of technique, I'll often just look at people's paintings and just be like, wow, that's cool. But when I spend time actually doing that myself, and then I look at the same painting, I kind of just see the brushstrokes. I just see how they're handling that particular area of, the artistic craft. And it kind of happens automatically. I just see it. And that's sort of what I'm advocating you do, is you try and get to a point where you're starting to see these things, and you just assess your image versus other images that you're aspiring to. And I think often you will just make natural connections and organize things naturally, right? I think a lot of this stuff just happens automatically and naturally if you just look at stuff with intent. I know that sounds sort of a little bit woo-woo and esoteric, but I genuinely think this is how our mind works when it comes to learning these sort of physical visual skills. I think what we can do is consciously pick one or two areas to improve on, from those areas that we're noticing might be, needing more work. And we consciously try and, in the next sort of creation cycle where we're creating an image from an idea, we try and sort of improve those areas, right? That one or two area. And basically just repeat, right? It's so important, again, when you start that, to get clear on your intent going into each image you make. So clarify your expectations, build a positive mental landscape about what would constitute success on your journey. Because again, that stuff is going to change. And I think if you really get that right, it will, again, allow you to have a much more positive relationship to the process and drawing. And again, I think that's actually what creates the type of high-level art that people can connect to, right? That's what will actually move the needle. So again, not taking on too much, having clear intent about what you're going to work on, what you're not going to work on. Why are you doing this? And again, what would constitute success in this instance? Because depending on how much you're trying to work on something, you may realize that, success is just getting to the end. That's a perfectly, reasonable level of success. Or you might sort of say, hey, I'm finally going to really work on a giant portfolio piece that's going to be my hero image going forward for the next few years. And actually, I really need this to be so polished and so finished and so awesome that I'm not going to bite off anything new. You know what I mean? I'm just going to be capitalizing on my current skills, showing them to, the highest level of quality possible. And I'm not going to try something tricky, right? The expectation that you go into each image with, the intent you have for each image is so important. And I think it's really often at the core of what people are, struggling with, right? And at the core of how they view the work, right? And how they, relate to the work. The better you relate to it, the more positive it is. I think the more you're going to do it, the more you're going to do it, the better you get. I really think it is often that simple. So those are some takeaways. Those are the main things that I would sort of use to sum up what I've covered over the last few hours of videos and information. Hopefully this has been helpful. This is, again, just sort of my view of it, but these are things that I found to help me going forward, as I've explained. And I've also found that these are the main sort of questions that people sort of tend to ask, over the years of sort of, hearing people and the sort of concerns people have. And these are all things that, again, I've sort of told people to do and I've suggested, and I feel like I've had sort of positive feedback from them, right? They've sort of tried it and they've said, yeah, that sort of did help. So anyway, thanks for hanging out, and watching this. I do appreciate you, taking the time to sort of, hear these sort of thoughts, and hopefully they're useful. Hopefully they can help you get your illustration to the next level, or clarify your thought, or again, more importantly for me, hopefully they can help you enjoy the process and enjoy drawing more. Because as I said, the more you enjoy it, the more time you're going to spend on it, the more time you're going to spend on it, the better you're going to get, right? And I really think it is that simple. So good luck with this. We'll catch you around.